do this, let's call this order, and you got your hat ready, or?
No, I forgot my hat.
Oh, all right.
So it's up to,
So it's up to you,
Dick.
Dick.
But by the way, if we get
I'm
out,
ready to go.
if we get out before 9, it'll be our earliest getting out this year.
Oh, there you go. All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you very much. Again, let's take a look to see. I don't know that we're going to do any votes, but if we do votes, you're an alternate this evening, and so
I think there's enough here.
it won't be official,
That's
but
right.
we appreciate your work. Okay? And everybody's opinion counts tonight, please. Okay. All right. I did send out a copy via email today on this, printed out copy. What this is it is exactly what we talked about last time, and it's where we left off, kind of our place where we left off. The adjustment, only real adjustment is I maybe changed an R from small letter to capital. And the other thing that I did was change the numbering, and I hope I followed the right numbering process that Sarah recommended. I think I did. Please, if I didn't, give me a holler, we'll fix it. I think the first thing we should do is decide that we feel that we want to move forward with it and adjust it based on the public hearing comments that we had. Do we feel strongly enough that we are moving forward in a positive direction that we'd like to continue?
Yes.
And that's my first question. Yes, yes, yes. No, no, no.
I just have a
I'm not
question.
sure, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
You know, so what if we put this forward as a warrant article, which is the intention, and it was voted down? Where are we at that point? I don't quite
We're no
understand.
different than where we're at right now.
Okay.
If it gets voted down, unless we were to come up with something, significantly different that reflected maybe the reason why we thought it was voted down, it would certainly be unlikely that it would be voted up.
But
Just,
would that, at that
Unless
point,
things around us change too.
but at that point in time, would it make short-term rentals off the board totally? That's what I'm concerned about. Okay. We're sure about that.
No, right now, actually, our select board is not enforcing the fact that short-term rentals are off the board.
Right.
They are actually off the board, it's just not being enforced.
All right. So so you're saying it wouldn't be enforced if this was turned down?
I don't know.
This
Won't change anything.
this being turned down doesn't change anything.
Okay,
It
all right.
may be the general discussion brings stuff forward. I think I'm less convinced that we have in our current zoning enough to win a court case against someone.
That was my major concern.
That's,
That was one of my major concerns too, if something should come up, mainly because people already have short-term rentals, and they could turn around and sue us because they don't like what's going on, or the people that are gonna become short-term rental people. Well, it applied to them, how come it can't apply to me, and that whole rigmarole that we might get ourselves mired in. And also some of these things in here about the safety issues and things like that. The town should not be responsible for that. The owner of the property should be responsible for that.
Right, there's nothing in here that says the town is responsible for that.
Well, I know, but it had been when we were talking about having inspections done, and I know we
Which is-
eliminated that at the last
which is-
meeting.
Yeah, basically what we
I just wanted to
did,
make that clear.
yeah, basically what we did, and the reason that we really shifted from what we had posted for the last public hearing is that I got input from your folks.
Yeah.
I got input, we got input from Jay Feenan, we got input from short-term rental folks, and we also got input from our legal counsel that differed from what we had heard
Right.
earlier.
Yeah,
All right, all that put together, we took a look and said, we don't really have a good place where we were to have a good leg to stand on and say, you know, Jay Henry can go in there and do a fire inspection, or Bennett can go in and do a home inspection. We would have been potentially, actually, the state fire marshal wouldn't support Jay doing that,
Yes.
as a for example.
Yes.
So if that's the case, if we put this in there, he might be prohibited from doing what we're asking him to do. And so it's like, well, that's kind of a dumb thing to leave in, if you will. And again, it's like, I think when we talked to Peter the first time about these things, we kind of said, yeah, we think you can do all these things. When we pushed hard, based on all the input, it's like, well, yeah, kind of, maybe not. Well, kind of, maybe not is a good opportunity for us to have more opportunity for being in the courts.
Exactly.
And no one wants to do that. Let me come back with what I'm thinking where
Okay.
we're at, and hopefully that might help put us on the right path for this evening. My sense is that what we're really trying to do is we're trying to give some reassurance to folks that we are doing something with short-term rentals, not nothing. Because right now, if you were to do a short-term rental, you might have the select folks come in and enforce short-term rentals and prohibit them entirely because it's not specified in our use currently as a permitted use. You could argue that, and in fact, somebody could argue that the selectmen aren't doing their job in enforcement, and that they ought to. We could go to court on that one, which we don't want to do. So this puts at least the town in a place where it says we recognize short-term rentals, and these are the things that we'd like to set in terms of rules around them. Now, we have handcuffs on in terms of what's allowed by the state for what we can and cannot do. We talked initially about doing inspections and doing this and that, and a lot of the things that we talked about, when you get down to it, there are competing parts of the state code that say, yeah, you can do that, and no, you can't. Well, that's a perfect opportunity for litigation, where you have laws that have conflicting messages. And the person who's interested in doing a short-term rental doesn't have any certainty at all. And the person who doesn't like short-term rentals doesn't have any certainty at all that they can keep them from being in the business of short-term rentals. So either way, if we leave it just untouched, there's possibility for litigation right now, just for doing nothing. So my thought is that moving from, this trying to get the be-all and end-all regulation is that we would do some basic things. One is we would decide what a short-term rental is, create an application process so that we know who's operating a short-term rental in town, and because we cannot do inspections unless there's an enforcement issue, have the person who's operating a short-term rental understand what the expectations are of somebody running a short-term rental. That they need to meet certain requirements, none of which I believe are unusual or unexpected. But some people run a business, if you call it a business, or operate and do things without knowing what the responsibilities are. And so we've tried to do is say, here are the responsibilities you have. This is what you're agreeing. If you're going to do a short-term rental, there are some basic requirements for you as the homeowner that you need to comply with. They are not unusual requirements. They are all supported, by the way, by state law. There's not one thing in here that's not supported somewhere in the state code. And so, from a litigation standpoint, no one's gonna come at us and say, gee, you're asking us to do something that really isn't supported. When we take a look at the legislation that's been proposed, whether it's from the realtor lobby or from the short-term rental lobby, most of what we have here is actually simplified. Because right now we can't, as somebody suggested in the public hearing, we can't, it's not like a dog license. You just go in and say, I need a dog license, I got a dog. And they go, okay, what's your dog look like, and this, that, a few questions, and you pay a fee, and you get your dog license. We can't do that for this.
They do require us to file an affidavit that they've been vaccinated, though.
Mhm.
So there's some there are some requirements, but because it is associated with property ownership, and property owner rights and regulation of property owner rights have a lot more convoluted opportunities. We have to go through this process for a simple recording. And there's an opportunity in here,
What do you mean
again,
by simple recording?
well, it's not a simple recording,
You
but
just said that, that's the reason why I was asking.
it's not a simple recording,
Okay.
but it's the closest we can come. With the current regulations that we have available to us by state law, we have to use a conditional use permit
Oh, I
in order
understand that,
to do that.
yeah, but,
So it's this is the closest thing we can come to a simple recording. With the current state law, is the conditional use permit. That's what we're allowed.
okay, I guess I just don't quite understand.
All right, please.
Okay, we have in here that it has to go to the selectmen, then it has to go to the planning board, and it has to go back to the selectmen, and it has to go
Yep.
back to the planning board before it's agreed upon.
No, it goes selectmen planning board or planning board selectmen and done. Doesn't go back and forth through.
Okay, and I've said this before, we only meet once a month, and the selectmen only meet twice a month. And this is gonna put somebody that wants to do this, or come in and say, I'm doing this, why should I bother, or, this is gonna take 3 months for me to get a permit. And I also don't mind saying to somebody, if the selectmen agree to it, having, just like a dog license, we talked about except that was the wrong use of words, just like we have a dog license, somebody has to come to the clerk's office, and she has to register who it is, but have them put down all the information, who to get in contact with, and they pay her a fee, just like they do for the dog license.
And we'd be happy to do that, but that's not what the law allows.
Okay, so
The law allows
There's
we
a
can have
Senate
two
bill
processes.
coming up.
We have either a conditional use permit.
that
or-
is gonna streamline it so that the
Yes.
clerk can take care of
That,
it. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's legislation that will allow that going, potentially, if that particular legislation passes.
But
There's-
Jerry called Bradley's office, and they said to him, it's nothing stopping from the towns from using this before it gets passed. That's what the information that he got from Senator Bradley's office.
Well, that's great,
And-
except that's not what we got from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, that's not what we've got from legal counsel.
And at this point, it's either do nothing or move forward with largely what we have. We don't have the time to.
I just think it's
that
becoming
sort of-
very cumbersome, our thing on our planning thing is to make things easy and simple and not confusing to people.
But this is
and not-
as simple as we can do it, as Bill has said. And, if the state allows a simpler process.
We can
in the
adopt a
next year,
simpler process.
We can make that change. And I think that I think that most cases are gonna be taken care of within a month. I mean, the timing is as bad as it can possibly be. It might take
6 weeks.
6 weeks. It's not gonna take 3 months. And I don't think that we're going to shut down current operations while this process is going on. I just don't see that it's really going to be onerous, you know, to anybody.
If the Senate bill
In terms of
passes,
the
do we
process.
change our wording?
If the Senate bill passes, we would need to change, we would need to very large scale change of this. I think this, yeah, it wouldn't just be a housekeeping type change.
No.
I
Process.
thought we discussed that if it was a conditional approval, that if they filled out an application, they were conditionally approved, the application would go through a process, and it could be denied, but from the point that they did the conditional application, the affidavit, that they could be in business. I thought.
Well, we did, but that was.
Didn't go
when we-
through?
Well, no, it was when we thought we were going to be faced with 100 inspections all at once. Again, I don't think, Dick on the Board of Selectmen can speak to this, but I don't think that, you know, if this gets passed, I don't think we're going to shut down any current operations while they go through this application process. So the only people that would wait up to 6 weeks would be those that want it, you know, that want to start.
Establishing a brand
A
new.
brand new operation. I don't think 6 weeks to do
Can they
that.
Is there any
Like
way
that in
we
there
could
somewhere?
sneak that in, that they would, any existing, you know, we talked about that. Last week.
We talked to council about that, and he recommended that we not.
Not even mention it.
No, because the enforcement's up to the select board and not up to us. We are not an enforcement organization. The select folks are not enforcing right now the fact that short-term rentals should ever exist at all. So if they were to all of a sudden say, gee, this new thing passed and, you know, for the last 8 years we've been letting you do this, but tomorrow we're going to come after you. I think that they would probably find themselves in court on that.
On a broader perspective, I think, you know, as a planning board, our job is to you know, to engage with issues that present themselves in town, and certainly short-term rentals are an issue. You know, whichever side you're on, it's certainly an issue that people are concerned about. And I think the job of the planning board is to, you know, to look at something like that, come up with legislation if we feel that's appropriate, that's as sound legally as possible. I think we've done our due diligence in that respect. I think what we've come up with is not a blunt instrument. You know, we, as was mentioned many times at the meeting, we really made an effort to thread the needle in terms of addressing types of short-term rentals that, you know, that most people find inappropriate. You know, short-term rental business operations within the residential district, but allowing short-term rentals where we feel that it supports the community and supports aspects of the master plan. But in the end, it's really the town. I think once we present our best and responsible effort at creating legislation that addresses a particular issue, then it's up to the town as to whether that legislation is put into effect. And certainly when it comes to concerns about lawsuits and that sort of cost, I don't think that it's the planning board responsibility to make that sort of decision for the town. I think it's the citizens, the residents of the town that make that type of decision, so long as we are putting something forward that is sound legal.
I'm not sure that the average person would totally understand this, and what I said about, you know, grandfathering, and I don't know, maybe, you remember we did that other thing about bubbles explaining it all? I mean, could we do something like that? Or is that, maybe we don't wanna start interpreting the law?
I think this is written fairly clearly.
Well,
I mean,
it is, but we've
after reading
been.
the state, the proposed state
Oh
law,
my God. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
that is difficult to read. You also have to diagram the sentences to figure out what they're saying. But this, and I think in comparison, the language here is very understandable.
Well, I'm not saying the language isn't, I'm just saying that we've been sitting here and discussing this for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I think we get it. I think your average person might not even read it and just make an assumption based on what they
Well, they
read.
need to read it. I mean, that's the
Well-
whole thing. If you're gonna,
Yeah.
the
But
law
as
is
we've
gonna
seen,
read it.
the electorate is not always right.
But is your issue of the current people or the people coming in?
I don't know, I'm just saying that I think that some people will not understand this, will not understand what it's saying. That's all I have to say. Just, I'm not saying it's not clear written, I'm just
I think
saying.
that's true of anything that
Yeah.
you put out there.
Exactly.
So the question is, can we get it dumbered down more than it is? I don't think we can.
No, I just think that maybe we, on the sideline, explain it. Maybe you could do an interview with the Conway Sun and Scott, and maybe just explain exactly what it all means. Maybe if Tom Eastman would be glad to do that.
Well, and I think to some degree, we, you know, in the interviews that we've had, we've tried to explain really what the focus, the purpose.
That has to be in the
background
paper,
is.
and you did do a good job doing that.
You can see in Kearsarge that there seems to be, there's one side and the other side, and there's not much in the middle.
I think the misunderstanding, especially between the different sides, is more of a philosophical difference, you know, as opposed to not understanding what Kearsarge is trying to do, or Jackson is trying to do, or the tools that you know, we're all using. I think it's more of a misunderstanding as to, you know, I believe I have these rights and I don't understand why you don't agree with that, or I believe the community needs these protections and I don't understand why you don't believe that. And I think that's where the misunderstanding is more philosophical.
No, exactly.
I do have another question. Remember when I was asking if, you know, why not just have a town clerk, have them come up like they do it? Well, in 4.4.3.2, the owner of the short-term rental should file a conditional use permit application to operate a short-term rental with a $50 application fee with the town's board of selectmen prior to opening a town short-term rental. That's the same thing. The girls are gonna have to deal with this.
They're gonna receive an application, that's
Yeah,
correct.
so
The
what-
same way you would with a
dog license.
Yeah.
So, and you just told me that's illegal.
No, what they have to do with that then is it has to be posted for a meeting for the select folks. And then it has to come to the planning board and back to the select folks again. And that's the process we don't like, but is currently available to us because what we're allowed to use as a community is we have a special use permit, which means that we would allow apparently that would be entirely into the planning board being the regulator, or we can use a conditional use permit. Those are the two opportunities we have right now.
Well, that's fine, I'm not arguing about that. What I'm suggesting is the process going through. You're gonna put all that on 100 applications or whatever it is that we have in the town.
That's true.
And having to have somebody designated in the town offices, whether it's the two Julies or whether it's Karen.
Remember the select folks say that it should be coming through, that's correct.
Well, that's no different than what I'm saying.
I'm not arguing with you.
The work that the Julies would be doing, I don't think would be much different, whether it's a dog license type.
Well, they don't do that. Karen
Recording.
does the dog licenses.
Whether it's,
And they're all over
whether it's a
right now.
conditional use permit or a simple recording, as far as the bureaucratic end, it's essentially the same work. It's taking the same information, and then it's up to the board of selectmen and the planning board to take it on from there. So I don't think that it being a conditional use permit means more work.
They're gonna receive a piece of paper in, it's an affidavit, and it has the
And who's gonna write
information.
the affidavit up?
They have to do that.
No, I mean, shouldn't they have something that somebody comes up to the window and says, can I have this
Yes, yeah,
application fee?
we'll have to create that, yes.
Okay,
But they'll have that. They'll have to fill it out and make sure they check all the boxes, sign at the bottom, and put a check for $50 on top of it. that's what they'll have to do. Then the behind the scenes, is the basics of it will be that it will have to be listed on the selectmen's agenda and say, we have these 30 applications for short-term rentals. Bop, 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 bop. They will have to look at it and make a determination as to whether or not they have anything that they want to say about it. But my guess is, unless it's something that has come up beforehand as an issue, or because the application itself is not properly completed, it's going to be pro forma. They're just going to send it to the planning board. We're going to have to put it on our list. And
Why does it have to go through two?
because
two
of the
boards?
conditional use permit. It's the only process we have. The other process is that we would control the whole thing, and the planning board would, the same thing, it would come into the offices here, and then it would be on the planning board's agenda.
Wouldn't it be the ZBA, I think?
Oh, excuse me, this, yeah. We're
But,
gonna,
and that would involve a public hearing, so that'd be a more involved, more onerous process than the conditional use permit.
Don't you think this is making it so much more cumbersome than needs to be done?
yes,
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't disagree, but there's no other law that allows us to do this.
I believe we can use the Senate bill wording until it's voted. We can, in town here, if we have a zoning ordinance, it's in place.
We don't have that wording tonight, and so it means not doing anything this year.
Well, I'm just.
I'm just at the
Is
reality.
that not correct, that we could use a zoning ordinance immediately, once it was proposed, public hearing and all that, until it's voted down?
But then if it gets voted down, then we have.
Or then we
we're
have to go
done.
back to what's in place.
Well, there's nothing in place, that's,
For
we could,
this,
we could
but-
put this in place and change it according to HB 458. If we put this in place with language from 458, or with a process from 458, and that doesn't get passed, and all of this is gone, we have to start over again. And so it'd be much easier to start with this and change according to whether that bill passes or not, than to do it reverse.
Okay? It
And,
just streamlines the process.
and that's
We agree, that would streamline the process. We would prefer to adopt that as soon as we could.
and that's assuming that we had time to craft that, and we don't. Tonight is it. We have.
Right, because tomorrow's the deadline.
However long it takes for you to put your hat on. This is what we have. So.
If the Senate bill is the Senate 458, which was emailed to us.
Yep.
I went through it carefully, diagramming sentences, et cetera. And I don't see how what we're proposing is any different than what's in the bill right here.
It just puts the process into the town clerk's hands, and it eliminates the back and forth between the planning board and the selectmen.
The one thing that it did, that it does not support, that we have in our ordinance, is the limitation of 25 rentals within the residential district.
And the other piece of the process is that it does not have an appropriate grievance section.
The state.
Yeah. So that,
So it's
we have a variety of groups that we need to satisfy, and if somebody has a grievance, that process does not support it. And therefore, if we adopted that and said that's how we're gonna move forward, then we would not be able to do what the bill also says, is that we can put into our process additional requirements to meet our own local desires, but we're limited on what we can do. One of the things that is possible for you to do as a local zoning group is to allow for a grievance. That does not allow for a grievance, so we would have to then change our process, if we adopted that, to put somewhere in the process a grievance in there, and that would require that it goes through either the select board or the, never mind, the planning board, which is what we're doing in the first place. What we're looking at is pro forma. We should be doing pro forma. If everything is good, it's just a stamp and move it on. And the burden on us is to list property owner, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to be there. The benefit to the homeowner who doesn't like what's going on or has a particular grievance, whatever it might be, is that they can say, I have a problem with this. And it allows them to then notify the select board that they have a problem, and the select board would then have to set a hearing to do that. That's one of the protections for the homeowners. We have a bunch of groups. We're not just trying to satisfy the people who are investing in short-term rentals, or just the realtors, or just the folks who run lodging establishments, but also folks who live in town. We have 4 groups of people that we have to look at and say, are we doing the best thing? And I think this is a little bit squirrely in process, but it's what we have available. I think it does require that folks actually agree that they're going to live up to their responsibilities. It tells homeowners if there's a real problem, they can go after and say, hey, there's a real problem here we need to know about. And the backside of this is and you can't do it if if you can adopt one piece of that, but not all the pieces of that, the enforcement part. If there is a grievance or there is a problem, or if we can go in with what we proposed and say, we need to inspect. And put something in writing that says we can do that.
Well, I understand that, but I also, at the last meeting when we had the hearing, people said that if, their insurance that they pay talks about that. So if you don't have rules and regulations for your insurance, so I don't know why we have to double
If they
it.
have insurance. We're not in the insurance business. We don't check to see that people have insurance. We don't go and say.
But we shouldn't do that, was what I'm saying.
I'm sorry?
It's up to the owner to, it's
Right.
his still responsibility.
I
no matter how
understand
you
that,
look
but
at
what
it.
you're saying is that the insurance company will do that anyway, and yeah, maybe they will, if the person's responsible enough to have insurance.
So,
And they're signing an affidavit, we're not,
And signing an affidavit, is that a legal issue? I mean, a so-called affidavit?
An affidavit is a legal document.
I understand that.
is there any way, I know we talked about insurance, and we're not in the insurance business, and you don't have to have car insurance, but is there any way that we could put that in the affidavit, is have you notified your insurance company? We can't do that?
No.
Okay, all right.
We can't do that. We have no right to do that. We have no right to do
Because
that.
you know if they're in the business, that they've got a mortgage, and if they got a mortgage, they gotta have insurance, and if they got a.
well, they don't necessarily have a mortgage. In fact, most short-term rental,
No,
only
but-
properties are being bought for cash, so there's generally not a mortgage. in
But
place.
if somebody's in the business.
They
of
certainly
just
have
like-
insurance, I won't question that.
They're using leverage and they've got a mortgage. and-
Again,
But
it-
the things we, the requirements,
Business here.
the requirements we have, that they're signing an affidavit, are requirements anyhow. There is no insurance requirement, so if we say you have to show us, proof of insurance, or you should, now we're requiring something that is
that's
beyond.
different than what's required.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that they show us that, just that they, you could back into it saying, do you have a mortgage? And something.
Yeah, but it's not our business.
Yeah,
That isn't
okay.
any of our
I got it,
business.
I got it.
You start asking personal questions and it's none of your business.
Right.
And if they had to do all these things for their insurance, then the matter of signing an affidavit is
It's no
only
big
gonna
deal.
take them a few minutes.
Right.
Well, people lie on their insurance policies, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, they can
People
lie
lie.
on an affidavit, but
People
then
lie
if
in
they're-
affidavits, we can't do anything about that. All right,
Can I
And I
ask
also
a
have
question
another-
about
please,
any?
please, go.
Okay, all windows or doors designed to open are able to be opened to provide emergency egress. all windows and doors is incorrect. Every sleeping area needs an egress window.
Right, and it says,
A living unit needs a secondary means of egress. But all windows or doors do not have to be egress. Doors,
I think
It'd be pretty hard to find a door that isn't.
if we add the wording, then, if I'm hearing you correctly, it would be all windows or doors designed to open for egress, are able to be open to provide emergency egress.
a window or door,
I think if we said all windows or doors designed for egress,
How about purposed?
or purpose for egress, or designed to open for egress, are able to be open to provide emergency egress.
okay. I just bring it up because
I understand what you're saying,
our
yeah,
building code
yeah.
requires a secondary means of egress.
Right.
Each
In a sleeping
sleeping
area.
area.
The intention is what you said. So if we
Yeah,
haven't
but-
said it exactly correctly,
This doesn't say that.
we can say it differently.
Okay.
And so how would we say it differently?
For egress, just add the words for egress. Is that
For,
what it is?
designed to open for egress, or able to be open to provide emergency egress?
What section is it?
What about,
It is section 4.4.3.6.
Third page in the
Item 2, B2.
how about
Yeah.
all windows or doors designated as emergency egress must,
Be operational.
De- Designated or designed? We have the
well,
word
designate, design is, I don't think design works in that
All right,
context.
designated and some
Or
of that.
how about all sleeping areas are required to have 2 egresses?
No, we have to follow exactly what I think
The
Dick had said, is that all windows or doors designed for egress, for emergency egress, I think is the right thing to say. All windows or doors designed open for emergency egress. Let me read this for you and see if you agree after I say it. All the windows or doors designed to open for emergency egress are able to be open.
And I would replace design with designated.
Okay.
Because
All
that-
right.
Designated is
Designated.
saying this window
Okay.
or door is the
That,
emergency
okay,
egress.
say, all right, so read it as you think.
So instead of all, try a
How about
window.
windows?
How about any window?
Any window, how about any window
What's
or
wrong
a
with
door?
All windows that are designated, if they're designated, they should be open, all of them, not just,
Right.
I think any
So,
overall
I-
advice or service.
I think we probably have to look at it and say sleeping areas.
Is it
Sleeping
only-
areas are required to have 2 egresses that,
A
Well,
door and a window,
we
so the
say
door
in
out.
the next point, no basement space shall be used as sleeping areas unless
Okay.
there's properly sized egress windows and or doors conforming to the town's adopted code. So we cover that.
basement.
And so I think what we're trying to say is that, you know, the fact that you have them, they need to be able to open properly. So we need language that says those designated windows or doors will open as they're intended.
Okay, you had it here, no basement space shall be used as sleeping areas unless there is properly sized egress window. Doesn't have to be plural.
Well, it's sleeping areas, so that could be windows for areas,
Okay,
and it's doors for areas.
and that, at least that's clear to me, and then conforming to.
Yeah, the
town's
the second one is just simply to say that they need to be functioning.
But there also needs to be 2 egress, window
Right, but that's,
or door.
yeah, that's the code, we don't need to specify
All right.
the code, I think we just, and really, all of this is, you know, I think we're sort of hitting the high points just to bring it to people's attention. I mean, we're not creating anything new in terms of code, it's really just,
If 2 is also in the code, would it make any difference to add, like you do on, we do on 3, to say according to the town's adopted codes, just to say we're not making this up, it is already.
what we do in 1, so.
Yeah, but the more
Okay, I'm
times,
sorry.
the more times you make a reference to a code, the more opportunity you have to spend some time in court. It's that simple. As opposed to simply saying to somebody, look, here's some basic stuff you need to do. This is all this is supposed to be.
And I think this is, most of this stuff is the kind of stuff that you probably don't, that aren't decoding your own home. It's kind of, I think, why we're hitting these points. I mean, I think most of us probably have a smoke detector somewhere that, you know, is still waiting for a new battery.
Speak for yourself.
You know,
Or a window that's painted shut.
right, or a window that's painted shut. So I think these, again, these are somewhat just pointing out some of the things that are more commonly an issue.
So since we can't walk away without the final words tonight, we have to come up with words, please. Somebody read a sentence that I think meets our requirement here. All windows or doors designated to open for emergency egress.
I don't need, you don't need to say to open there, or just say to emergency egress.
Okay.
Are in,
Or
Function
function,
properly.
functional,
Function properly.
functional.
shall be functional, shall be in function in order. So, I mean, whatever is the best.
Can I suggest the word maintain?
Okay. Any window or door designed for emergency egress shall be able to.
Maintain
shall-
operational order.
Shall open.
Shall be maintained and operational.
Yeah,
Or-
sorry.
Can we say that?
Maintain-
Shall be maintained and operational?
Maintained and functional or
Yeah.
operational.
Maintained
Does that
and
work for you? Does that get
Works
to
for
it?
me.
operational.
All right, and let's read it back and make sure we're good.
Any window or door designed
Designed or
for
designated.
emergency egress.
Designated.
Designated for
Oh, for emergency
emergency
egress.
egress.
Are to be maintained in functional order. Or are maintained, to make it,
Yeah,
are maintained.
are maintained,
Shall be
not
maintained.
shall be, are.
Okay.
So any window or door designated to open for emergency egress is maintained
Operational.
and operational. Does that make it?
Yeah.
Because that's what we intended. That's not what we said.
It's getting close.
Right.
All right, that's why we're
Same
doing
with
this, okay. All right, you guys want to go through this one by one, or how do you want to go at it?
What the 3 recommendations that you.
Yeah, I
said?
tossed some recommendations out about things I thought came out at the planning hearing, which I think we should address, and you want to catch those first and then grab at the rest of them after?
I say just go right through it, starting with the top one.
Okay,
They all-
so,
they all look
Start
good
at
to
the
me.
beginning?
At the beginning. Or we could go at the end.
Are you saying go through the recommendations or through the?
I say go through the
okay,
recommendations.
so for the recommendations, the first 2 recommendations were on 4.4.6.1, which is on the last page. All right. Approvals may be revoked for failure to comply with this ordinance or with any conditions of approval imposed as part of a conditional use permit. The first violation of this ordinance will result in a warning, will result in a civil penalty, will result in a revocation. Do we want to change the wills to May, or do we want to change any of the wills to May, all the wills to May, well, some of the wills to May? What do we want to do?
Will.
Will?
I say will all the way, which means you
All
could
right.
go back and
I
say,
have to tell you that both legislations that have been offered out, both the community-based one and the Realtor one, both say May.
well, what do they know?
I think it should be May as well.
May allows whomever it is who's doing the enforcement to take a look at this, like we heard earlier today. If Chris Burley is the guy who's looking at it, or if it's Jay Henry looking at it, he's looking at it and saying, gee, you know, I have to impose this fine because it says I will do that. Versus, you know, well,
If you'll
it,
put up a smoke detector or.
yeah, then, okay, we can let that go.
So it's May?
I think it's May.
I like that.
May.
I think it's May.
And do you want May on all the Mays, or do you want May?
You convinced me. You convinced me. You guys are so good.
I don't know,
I
but I
like
think
May
the
on all of
second,
them on
Yeah.
that
Bill,
4.61.
Do you want a will anywhere? I'm open to either which way. I don't think they all ought to be will, so.
I think the third one should be well.
Pardon?
I think the third one should be well. We've already given them 2 Mays.
You are.
Well, let's go May not. Then
I like May on all of them.
I do like will would be the last one.
You want to hammer
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
they've gotten a warning and a penalty, then, and then there's a third violation, it seems like.
But the reality is if it's a May, they can get 2 warnings. They said it should be.
Right,
2
they
Mays
could get
or
multiple,
one.
they could get
Well,
multiple.
I'm just saying, by the time they get
To
to
a third.
the number 3,
They've probably talked to a lot,
them. They've established a
a pattern of disobedience.
3 strikes, you're out.
so I can go with the will in the last one.
Going once, going twice,
I'm there.
May, and will.
May and will.
I guess I'm outnumbered. I'll just put May, will in there then.
Gosh, it's almost.
Okay, the other one on 4.4.6.1 is if a revocation occurs, the owner may not apply for reinstatement for a period of 1 year. We heard real noise at the public hearing about cutting their business off for a whole year.
Yeah, well, if they're not going by the safety regulations, which is about all you can get them on, then they should fix
I
whatever
would,
the problem is.
Just a heads up, none of the advised legislation at the state level is a year.
It's 3 months, isn't it?
It's 3 months for the realtors, and no, serious, 3 months for the realtors and the short-term rental guys, and it's 6 months for the community folks. We would be,
4.5 months?
we would be extra
Extra nasty.
nasty about that.
I don't
So,
like that.
What if we change it to 6 months?
I mean, I think it's, the longer it is, the more of a penalty it is, and the already you're suffering a financial penalty.
right,
I think that, at the point where with the use, the permit's been pulled, really, we're looking just to get things fixed. And I think, I'm happy with a shorter period of time. I
Yeah.
don't know that we need to levy more of a penalty.
I offered out 3 months or 6 months, 3 months or 6 months, 3 months or 6 months.
3 months.
6.
3.
I'm more in favor of the 3.
3 months it is.
Because they still could be rejected. It's not an automatic, right?
Well, and my assumption is if the, whatever,
They can.
resulted
they
in
can
the.
reply.
Right.
They can
They
reapply.
have, yeah, they have to reapply and they have to have corrected what they've done. And that gives them 3 months to think about it and still.
Go sit in the corner.
Time out.
But also then, in 3 months, they reapply, then whatever panel looks at that, they can say, well, did you straighten it out? Are
Exactly,
you gonna
yeah.
straighten out?
Yeah.
What's the deal here? Sign on the dotted line. Right?
3 months, good?
Yeah.
Good?
Yep, 3. Okay.
All right,
One
so
more.
that's, all right, we've got, all right,
I have another question.
sure, yeah, or while we're there, yeah, or,
The maximum number of people per dwelling unit can be advertised for any published listing or other form of marketing shall be 2 people for each bedroom listed on the town issued building permit.
that is one of the next ones we have to talk about.
Okay,
All right, so if you want to go, jump to that one, we can do that.
okay.
Sure.
The,
Go ahead.
And I said this before at some of the other meetings, that if people come with a family, okay, there's a mother and father hopefully, and that's 1 bedroom. And then the other bedroom, and I think I've mentioned this before, could have 2 sets of bunk beds in it,
Yeah.
could have a sleep sofa, could have a number of other things in it. And I don't think that it's fair for people to say, oh, I can't bring the 3rd kid with me because I can't sleep in that place.
Well, we're not doing anything about use. This is all what's being marketed for, and if someone does short-term rentals, you know, you look at how many, I look at how many bedrooms it's advertised for and say, okay, you know, I've got this many people going, and that number of bedrooms suffices for the number of people that, you know, how our sleeping arrangements. And so what we're doing doesn't limit who can rent a short-term rental, it doesn't limit how many people can use the short-term rental, it only limits how many people the short-term rental can be marketed for.
And who's gonna monitor that? Are you gonna be on the computer every 5 minutes and saying, and an owner could say, I've got 3 king-size beds and I'm, you know, and I'm gonna have 6 people in there or something?
Normally when you see the ads, and you take a look at them, it'll say sleep 6,
Mhm.
sleeps 12, sleeps 32,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they've got, and all we're saying is the number that they can insert there is the 4 bedrooms times 2 plus 2.
What happens if you have 4 bedrooms?
That's 10 people. Sleeps 10.
Okay.
That's
Plus
the-
2,
that's
so
the-
Yeah, that's what,
you're gonna have.
Okay.
what Bill sent out earlier, that's what you're suggesting.
Pardon?
That's what you're suggesting in
Yeah.
your, what you sent out to me, plus 2.
Oh, well, it isn't written in here.
It's
Plus
not
2 per bedroom or just plus 2?
No, just plus 2. So your 4 bedrooms is 10, 5 bedrooms would be 12.
Okay.
If you have 12 bedrooms, it would be 26.
Yeah, 3 bedrooms is 8.
And the flip side of this is what you might hear from Jay Henry, which is to say that a single-family home is really limited to a family plus 3 unrelated individuals. And so from a state fire perspective, if you're trying to put 12 people into a 2-bedroom home, just because you have extra beds here and extra beds there, you're actually violating fire laws.
Oh, I understand that.
But we don't want to get into that, because the problem with that whole conversation is that
Who's gonna monitor it?
who's going to monitor it? How are you going to work through enforcement? On the other hand, if there is an issue or a complaint, he's not going to look at this as his issue. He's got to look at fire codes and deal with fire, what he's responsible to do according to the state fire marshal. And he would have to do that regardless of whether it's a short-term rental or any other kind of rental, or a residence. We're not changing the law, we're not changing what the requirements are for fire codes. All we're saying is that from a marketing perspective, we would like to put some reasonable number out there for how many people would be accommodated within that kind of house.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm saying that people are gonna violate that.
Oh, yeah.
We know that.
People lie.
Like, exactly. So how
So
you
how are we going to somehow legislate people lying?
We can't.
So why would we put that in there to legislate? I'm having trouble understanding how we could do things differently that would meet your objection.
I'd say leave the words, we can't enforce it, we know that. But as far as a liability situation on this thing, we tried.
But where we can enforce it without a whole lot of trouble is looking at the listing.
Oh.
Yeah, and where that's going to come up is someone's going to come into the town office and say, there's a short-term rental next door to me and there's 10 cars parked
Mhm.
there every single weekend. And it's a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house. And then when we hear that, then we can very easily look at Airbnb or VRBO or HomeAway or any of the other sites and see what the listing says. And either the listing complies with our ordinance and the septic approval for that
Mhm.
home, or it doesn't. And that's how we monitor and how we police it.
All right, if I can back up, please. Right now, it says, it shall be 2 people for each bedroom listed. That's what we have. Do we want to stick with that? Do we want to, we heard noise out in the public hearing that that was too restrictive. We also heard opportunities for looking at square footage, which is really complicated and would be a nightmare to either figure it out and talk about simple. God help us on
Or
that.
enforcement issues.
And enforcement, it doesn't even fit with anything associated with the fire code, so there's no basis for it. There's no basis for this, other than closely, maybe, somewhat closely, maybe used for septic.
Oh,
Somewhat. Not perfect.
as we know now.
But it's somewhat.
pieces
So
placed
at least it would have some pinning to some reality.
But doesn't the homeowner, no matter how you look at it, the homeowner is still responsible for having a septic system cleaned out and
Yes, they are.
finding out how many people are actually staying there?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's their responsibility.
And all we're saying is that when you go to market your home, please don't put it out there for 30 people if it's only gonna be able to accommodate 4.
Okay.
Do you
This
want,
gives
but do you
us
want to
an-
add, +2? I mean, I like that idea. +2.
Sounds fine to me.
Right, and we talked about, allowing for kids, but
Right.
that becomes a little bit messy in terms of codifying. I think +2 is brilliant.
Yeah, because we have it written, it's +2 without consideration for age.
Right, I think it's 2 per bedroom plus an additional 2.
Right.
It's just to give it a little bit more
Yeah.
leeway.
Okay, I like that better.
That's very little.
Yeah.
And I didn't wanna deal with age, because, God, that's another
Yeah.
thing, another complexity that needs.
I like that plus 2 thing.
Those ideas.
I like your idea though.
Okay, so how should we express that, please? Shall be 2 people for each bedroom listed on the town issued building permit.
Question.
Plus an additional 2 people per dwelling.
Plus
Yeah, I was thinking.
2 people, plus 2 people without consideration.
I don't think we need to have
Or-
consideration.
No,
Okay,
too
without,
many words.
plus 2 people.
Per
Well,
dwelling.
I didn't do that.
Per
Plus-
dwelling.
Listen,
Per
Plus 2
dwelling.
people per
Per
dwelling.
dwelling.
That makes it very clear that it's
just
not
on
2
a
bedrooms.
plus 2
Yes.
people per dwelling?
Per
Yeah.
dwelling.
Mhm.
All right, I like your words.
It's redundant, but.
All right, I'm gonna read it back, so you guys hear it.
Yep.
Maximum number of people that the dwelling unit can't, well, it says that the dwelling unit can be advertised for at any published listing or other form of marketing shall be 2 people for each bedroom listed on the town issued building permit, plus 2 people per dwelling.
You could throw an additional in there.
2
Yeah.
additional people.
Additional people.
Mhm.
Okay, do we
Did I
have to say
notice
per
that somebody
dwelling
has
if
a
it's,
hat on?
do we have to say per dwelling if we said the dwelling
be
unit
done
up
tonight.
front?
Really gonna post it tomorrow.
I don't think.
Per
so.
unit, you could say per unit.
Well, we say that the maximum number of people that the dwelling unit can be advertised for in any published listing or other form of marketing shall be 2 people for each bedroom listed on the town issued building permit, plus 2 additional people.
Yes, that's great. Good words.
Because otherwise, we're
Yeah.
being redundant.
You're right.
We're good? All right, thank you. So, we got one more on the listing of 4 that I had recommended that we look at.
No, I
And-
only saw 3. Damn.
Which one?
Well, the other one is around this
25.
25
Oh, yeah.
times.
What does the state say, 30?
No, the state doesn't say anything. I think
Well, this is something
Bill
we've added.
was concerned that we were creating different classes of homeowners or properties, I guess.
Yeah, somebody has a current use and can do it unlimited versus somebody who starts, you want to start turning your home into a short-term rental next month. And you're limited to 25. And the guy next door who did it last year, he's got unlimited. We heard from the folks who are in the business, 25 is really cutting it pretty tight.
Right.
And so the question is that, and part of the reason we want this in here is that we want to get off the list that says, when you go invest in your short-term rental, go to Jackson because they have unlimited rentals for short-term rentals.
And if we don't limit them, I mean, because right now, the character of Jackson is our inns. And if we lose that, we don't want to be the town of as far as short-term rentals. And what's happening is they're in direct competition and they don't have any of the restrictions.
So my feeling is that the 25 sounded like it was for people who are really going to try to do this. It might be a little bit too tight. And so I thought maybe we could open it up to maybe 28 or 30, but no more than that. I'm not sure if that gets us off the hook for that person who thinks it's
I thought the
tight,
reason
or
we-
if that's 25 is where we should stay. But based on the public hearing, based on the comments, I'm trying to suggest that we need to at least look at this, consider it, and make a decision among us whether or not we want to stay 25 or we want to pump it.
I think the whole reason we put it in there was as a discouragement for people just buying a house and somebody not in town, somebody who has no interest in the town but is only interested in making a profit. Is that if they are then limited to 25, it's not profitable for them.
Yep.
And so,
Big table.
so they, then they would think twice about going through the efforts of buying this particular house and changing it into short-term rentals and not be there.
I think in that light, I think 25 is a good number. I mean, it's somewhat.
We thought the number was good. I'm just responding to the fact we had a public hearing where people said
Right, but-
that, pick it,
So at the public hearing, I think what we didn't hear were second homers saying that 25 wasn't enough. And I think that's what, we're allowing 25 to provide for the second homers, and it seemed like that served them. I'm not as concerned about creating different classes in those that are quote unquote grandfathered, if they are one way or another, and those that aren't, because every zoning creates that. I mean, when we do frontage, you create properties that are now not subdividable and properties that are subdividable. And that clearly is a huge difference in value between two properties, especially if it's the same number of acres and one just happens to have less frontage than the other. You could argue, that fairness issue, I think, is that we are allowing properties with long-term tenants unlimited short-term rentals versus properties without long-term tenants that are limited to 25. I think properties with long-term tenants typically they're less less problems with them because there's a long-term tenant, so, you know, it kind of solves that part of things.
I heard differently from somebody. He has short-term rentals and he has long-term rentals. He doesn't like the long-term rentals at
No,
all.
that's not what I was saying. I was saying that if a property has a long-term tenant, whether it's the owner or a renter, it's less likely that there are going to be the party house type problems on that property because
Well, that's not what he
because
said.
someone has
The
to
trash
live
is
there.
terrible, he said, for long-term rentals. I'm just passing on what I heard.
I'm not talking about long-term
That's not-
rental.
That's not what he said.
I'm talking
What
about
he
a
said
short-term
is
rental
that-
property with a full-time tenant. That
Full-time
full-time
person.
tenant is gonna monitor the property more so than a property without a full-time tenant.
Okay. yeah,
So, you know, that takes care of that a little bit. And I think that in principle, you know, it sounds, I think most people that, you know, most people that even that are against short-term rentals, or at least against them as a business operation in a residential district, seem generally in favor of short-term rentals as a way of helping someone own and live in a house. But I think there is a bit of a class creation when you say this house has a long-term tenant and can do short-term rentals in an unlimited fashion, and this house does not have a long-term tenant and is limited to 25. I don't think we're running contrary to any opinion by doing it that, you know, doing the 25, but that.
No, in fact, most of the provisions that are in the community-based are more restrictive than this.
Wow, really?
And the ones on the realtor-based eliminate this entirely. So,
So,
I mean, those are the two why.
and I would always say if we were concerned about that fairness issue,
Mm-hmm.
then we make it 25 or 30, but it's 25 or 30 whether you have a long-term tenant or no long-term tenant. I'm comfortable going with the 25 and unlimited with long-term tenant because I think that fits what we've been hearing.
Yeah.
But
This is gonna sound weird, but 26, that's half the year.
Well, I mean,
It's 6 months.
most people
26.
rent them for the weekend, so
Right, it's 26.
25 is actually like 50 days.
Right.
So I think that's a little short myself. I think we should still grandfather the existing people, but I think, I think 25 is short.
for a second owner.
Well, yeah, for somebody that's trying to afford a home that they can retire in. I got somebody in my street that's exactly what the situation is.
So if we use 26, that would be half a year.
Be half a year.
But
20,
people
26
they don't rent by the week for the most part.
No, I know, but that would be 26 weekends.
26.
That would be half the year. We'd be saying,
Well, it's not half the year.
well, if you have 26 weekends, it's half the year.
But the reality is you could have 26 weeks.
You could.
Good.
Because a rental is a week, it's not,
You could have 50, you could have 52 weeks. Right, rentals 2 weeks. Then
that's correct.
that could be around.
Yeah, we're not limiting how many days they have.
The community-based ones tend to have a maximum number of days.
Right.
And the maximum number of days are usually 60 days, period. And that's it. So 60 days compared to this,
30 weekends.
this is,
60 days would be 30 weekends,
yeah.
or, you know.
Yeah.
Most short-term rentals, at least in my experience, don't rent for 2 days or less. It's usually 3 or 4 days minimum.
I'm gonna rent one for 10, so.
I see a lot of 2 days.
Guys.
Whatever. We can always change it.
Well, no, we can always
Well,
change it
that's
some other time, but
Right.
tonight we have
Right.
one
Tonight,
choice.
we're gonna,
So
Is it 25, is it 30, is it 28, is it 26?
I'll go 30.
I'll go 30.
30.
Yeah, I'll leave it at 30.
I'll do 30.
30?
There it is.
Done. All right, those were the ones that I had targeted for us to look at. Are there any other ones that you guys would like to open
No, it's going
up for consideration? I think the rest of it is pretty much boilerplate. For conditional use permit, which we don't like the process, but we're stuck with. That we are asking for an affidavit to not change the law, but really to affirm what the requirements are The other thing I just would like to point out is that this item 4.47, the last one was not properly illustrated when we talked last time at the public hearing. We did talk about somebody who had a grievance. They could appeal the approval to the select people. But in terms of enforcement, the 4.4.7 provides an enforcement provision for the town, and that is that nuisances or any other dangers to the public health reported by lodgers or abutters may require an inspection.
What is RSA 147-?
That basically says that the town is allowed to inspect any property that is not in, it does not meet code.
Does that put us up for a lawsuit
No,
anyway?
That is the law now.
Okay,
You can do that now. Basically, it just specifies that, basically it reiterates what provision we would be using in order to have enforcement.
If an abutter sees the septic system overflowing, or a renter says, you know, oh, toilets don't work, or whatever.
Or I couldn't open the window in the bedroom downstairs in the basement because it was
Or
painted
anything like
shut.
that, we can say, oh, we'll go in and look at it.
okay.
That's what that is.
So that's fine, I just wanted to make sure we weren't
Yeah.
any.
It's not
any
creating,
law
we're not
stuff going
creating,
on here, legal.
there is nothing in here that's really creating new law. I think the only thing that we have that is really of something different than what's out there is the 30 rentals per dwelling. That is less constrictive than other towns that have put in and had passed in, has been supported in the courts for them to allow them to do that. So we're doing it on a less restrictive basis. So we're not here being pioneers on anything.
That's good.
There's nothing in here, and I don't think no matter who you are, I don't think you should be happy with everything about this. Because if you're a realtor, shit. I mean, excuse me, there's stuff here that I don't like.
Don't
I didn't
put me
say-
into a
No, if
You put
you're,
a round peg into a square hole.
and if you're a short-term rental person, I got more stuff I gotta do. And if you're a homeowner, you say, well, look, they're allowing short-term rentals. And if you're a lodge owner, you're saying, look, they're getting away with murder. So, it's never gonna be happy times for everybody looking at this. On the other hand, it creates a definition of what a short-term rental is. It specifies what the short-term rental person needs to do in order to comply with town codes, building codes, fire codes, and all kinds of things that are out there. It requires them to notify us that they're actually, they actually have a license number for which they're collecting taxes, which are remitted to the state, and for which I believe we get
Back to the town.
some comes back into the town. And that they have some responsibilities. And it's their responsibility, not the town's responsibility. And if they get out of line, they're doing not the right things, yes, we will question them, we will put them on the carpet.
No matter how you look at it, we need to address it.
The other choice is to leave it where it is, where short-term rental folks right now look at it and say, gee, the town can come out next year and say, we'll just prohibit them entirely.
I think you and Scott have led us down a very reasonable middle
Yeah.
road. I really do.
Done a great job.
Do you have anything to say?
Let's go.
I see a hat, so I believe a motion
I motion to
is
adjourn.
in order.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it every time. It's not fair.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adjourn this.
I heard a motion from Dick
Oh.
Bennett, and I heard a second from
Dave.
Dave
Campbell. Any in favor?
I do have one more question though.
Oh,
No, when's the next meeting?
Because we cannot change this now that we've done this. I will put this, I will get the changes, or David will get the change. One of us will get the changes in to Julie tomorrow. It will be posted so that, to your question around, you looked at that thing and nothing came up. There will be a document that will include whatever changes we made tonight to fine tune things. And we cannot make any changes between, in fact, we cannot make any changes.
Okay, yes.
We're done.
Can I suggest you do
Fourth
it?
of February.
And the 5th of, February 3rd is a Monday, and that will be our next meeting. It will be at 7 o'clock, and that will be it.
Okay.
Can I suggest you do it in this format rather than the big letters? Because it's separated more, it's more of a paragraph thing, I can
I
read it
don't
better.
know about
All right, very difficult.
I did it in big letters so that people
Who's
that,
doing it? Is you or Julie's doing it?
I did this,
Oh, well, no
and I
wonder.
did this one just bringing the document over. I didn't make any changes. I just brought
Get
it.
him out, you did the big letters.
But I like it much better because I can read it without my glasses.
Yeah, I can too. If I had glasses on, I can read it better.
I think we had a motion to adjourn and everyone said
Yeah.
yay.
Yay!